Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Unit 5, Day 2. Today we are looking at solving equations using algebra tiles, but this time we have the distributive property involved, okay? And so, before we get started, I just want to draw your attention to this key right here, okay? And so, last time when we were looking at the algebra tiles, and normally when we think about algebra tiles, the lighter color represents the positive and the darker or the shaded color represents the negative. Well, friends, unfortunately, that's not always true, okay? And so if we look closely at this one, this key has the shaded rectangle being the positive and the unshaded being the negative, okay? And then same for the ones, okay? So it's really important that you pay attention to what the key says and what it indicates, and that tells you what each sort of block or rectangle represents, all right? So to get us going, I want us to look at this example. We have 3 times the sum of x plus 2 equals negative 12, okay? And now the picture is already drawn, but I want you to think about this in terms of this, normally this is the distributive property where we have a number on the outside of parentheses, but I want us to think about that number on the outside as saying 3 groups of x plus 2, right? And so this is x, this is plus 2, and then I just have 3 groups of it, right? So when I think about distributing this, all I'm doing is I'm saying that I have 3 groups of x plus 2. That's x plus 2, that's x plus 2, that's x plus 2, and I have 3 groups. And then when I model that, it is really easy to see, okay, well, this is x, 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 or well, I have 3 x's, and then I had positive 2, positive 2, positive 2, so that gives me positive 6, okay, so I add that up, and then these are all negative, right, and I have negative 12. Okay, and so this is the equation shown by this picture and when I distribute that, okay? So now I'm going to solve this. Well, if I think back to how I was solving it when I had the picture, okay? So I'm trying to get the x's by itself, and to get the x's by itself, I had to get rid of whatever other term I had. So I got to get rid of these positive 6. Well, to do that, I have to add negative 6 in order to do 0 pairs. So what I have to do is I have to add negative 6 squares here, right? And that's going to form 0 pairs, and that's going to get rid of those. Well, if I do it to one side, I also have to do it to the other side because it is an equation. And when I do that, these 6's, the positive and the negatives, they're going to cancel each other out. You're going to give me 0, so I get rid of them. And now I have 3x equals negative 12 minus 6 is negative 18. Okay? And so now I have 3 x's, but I have 18 over here because I've added 6 blocks, and I'm not going to do that, but I'm solving it down here, okay, just using the numbers here. And so now what I did after that is I have to divide all of my blocks among the 3. So I have to put them in 3 different groups. In other words, I have to divide each of these by 3. And so 3 divided by 3 is going to cancel out. It's just going to give me 1, and it just would be 1x, but it cancels, leaving me with x equals negative 18 divided by 3. And that gives me negative 6. Okay. And so, just to make it plain again, right, whenever I am solving this equation, you have to do the inverse operation. And hopefully you saw that when we were using the tiles, right? We had a plus 6, so we minus 6. And right here, we're doing 3 times x. So instead of doing multiplication here, I have to do the opposite, which is division. So I divide it, all right? And so that's how I get x equals negative 6, all right? Now let's look at the next one. So if I have this note here that you need to pay attention to, the negative just means the opposite, okay? So again, if I remember, right, the shaded tiles is positive and the unshaded is negative, all right? So this says I have the opposite, so instead of having a positive, this will be a negative, okay? So I have two groups of x plus 3. Well, this is x, this is plus 3. And currently this one is positive right here, but because this is a negative outside, that means the opposite. So that's why it is flipped to the negative side. So this is really negative x, and this is negative 1, and this is negative 1, and this is negative 1, right? And then this is negative x, and that's negative 1, and that's negative 1, and that's negative 1, right? So when I figure out what this, same thing over here, negative 1, negative 1, negative 1, negative 1. So this equation, when I write it out just as numbers, I have negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm sorry, negative 2x minus 6 equals negative 4. All right? And so now I want to solve this, okay? And so to solve it, I'm trying to get the x's by itself. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do the inverse operation. So instead of having negative 6, I got to add 6 positives, squares. So I'm going to, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Okay, that's going to give me 0 pairs. So that cancels out. Now I have negative 2x equals negative 4 plus 6, and that is going to give me a positive 2, right? Because the 4 and the 4 are going to give me 0 pairs. Those are going to cancel out, and I'm going to be left with 2 positives, okay? Now, this is negative 2x, right? Again, negative means the opposite. So what I'm going to end up doing is having to take this and flip it and give it the opposite. But this right here, whenever I have a number next to a letter, a variable, this is multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication, or the opposite, is division. So I got to divide by negative 2, all right? These negative 2's are going to cancel, leaving me with x equals 2 divided by negative 2, which I got to flip it. It's the opposite. And so that's going to give me a negative 1. All right, so my answer is x equals negative 1 there. All right? So you now have a couple examples that I want you to try to solve on your own, okay? And so I want you to just simply start by just drawing the picture, and the picture is just going to help you, figure out what the equation is. And then from there, I want you to solve it. You don't have to draw pictures anymore. You can just solve it using the numbers, all right? And so I want you to pause this video, and I want you to attempt to solve the first 2 on your own, and then we will check it. So pause it, and then I want you to play it back to see if you got the first 2 questions correct, all right? Make sure you use the 2 examples I've already given you to help you as you do the next 2. All right, so hopefully you paused it and attempted to do these on your own, because that's the way this is going to really help you, is if you try to do this on your own, okay? So let's start. All right, I have 2 groups of x, okay? And again, the positive is shaded, and I got, okay, so I got x plus 4. Then I got another group, so I got 2 groups. Okay. These are all shaded. And then equals negative 2, which is 2 unshaded. All right? And so when I do that, okay, this then shows me, all right, now I have 2 x's. And then I also have 8 plus 8 positives equals 2, right? Again, I didn't say this. I probably should go ahead. Again, guys, we normally right? If we saw this without the pictures, we would just distribute those two, that 2 on the outside, right? We would do 2 times x and then 2 times 4, and that's what we're doing with the pictures. We're just doubling it, right? Because that's what the 2 groups represent. All right, so let's continue. Just wanted to say that. Now I got to get the x's by itself, so I got to get rid of this plus 8. So to get rid of this plus 8, I would have to add 8 negatives, right? To get 0 pairs, right? And when I get 0 pairs, that's going to cancel that out. Now I have 2x equals, okay, I added 8 positives over here. That's going to cancel out those. I added 8 negatives over here. That's going to get rid of those 2, and I'm going to be left with 6 negatives left over there. All right. And now this is 2 times x. To do the inverse, I'm now going to separate those 2. I'm going to divide those up. Divide it by 2. Divide it by 2. Those are going to cancel, leaving me with x equals -6 divided by 2, and that gives me -3. All right, and then let's look at the last one. We have 3 times, the sum of -x plus 2 equals 9. All right, so I got 3 groups of positive 2. So I got to draw 3 groups of that, right? And again, this negative is unshaded. Positive 2, right? Another group of an x, -x, okay, equals 9. These are all positive. And that's 9. All right. Okay. So and again, remember these are all negative x's. So how many negative x's do I have? I have -3x, right? And then 2, 4, 6 plus 6 equals 3, 6, 9. All right, and then 9. All right. So I'm trying to get the x by itself. So I got to get rid of this +6, these positive 6's. And so I'm going to add -6. I'm going to add -6 squares to make 0 pairs. Whatever I do to one side, I also have to do to the other side. These are going to cancel. I'm left with -3x equals 9 minus 6 is 3. Okay. And then this is -3x. So I'm sorry, -3 times x. So the opposite or the inverse of of times 3, -3, is to divide by -3. Divide by -3, and just think that that negative just means opposite. So I'm going to end up flipping these ones over, right? That's going to cancel, and it gives me 3 divided by -3 is -1. And so that is my answer there. All right. All right. Hey, I'm going to end the video here so that it doesn't get too much longer, but I want you to go ahead and solve the remaining 4 problems on your own. And once you have done, please raise your hand so that I can come and check them. And that is it for this video. In this video, we've learned how to solve equations involving the distributive property by using algebra tiles to assist us with it. All right. Let us know if you have any questions. Hey, go ahead and like it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.